One letter, 2 deliveries, and a secret someone tried to erase. Welcome to Fogged Clue. I am your host, Marin. I love seeing familiar names in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Your thoughts make this journey unforgettable. Let's read on. It had rained in the night without anyone noticing it begin. By morning, the boulevard was the color of old pewter, the gutters moving with a slow, patient current that carried cigarette ends, a cork, a scrap of lace paper from a bakery. From his window on the Boulevard Richard Lenoir, Maigret watched a tram slide past with the weary grace of a cow in mud. He did not hurry his coffee. Madame Maigret, in a housecoat the color of weak tea, had set 2 cups on the table and placed a pan of water to heat for the morning eggs. In the smell of damp wool and coffee, there was a faint draught that lifted the corner of the newspaper and dropped it again, like a tired hand. "You didn't sleep," she said, not as a complaint. "Enough," he answered, which meant, of course, not enough. They spoke that way, with the kind of economy that comes after years of noticing each other's footsteps in the hall. He had the impression he could measure their life together by the sounds of the building, the concierge sweeping, the butcher's boy thumping up the stairs, the child on the 2nd floor who had a cough like a bark. It was a morning like others, except that it pressed at the temples more than usual, as if the weather were trying to fit inside the rooms. On the table lay an envelope, ungainly in its stiffness, with a stamp placed too straight. Madame Maigret turned it under her fingers as she wiped a damp ring from the oilcloth. "This came with the milk," she said. "The postman must be early." "Earlier than the rain," Maigret muttered. He did not reach for the envelope at once. He lit his pipe and watched the match burn down and go out against the rim of the ashtray. The handwriting on the front, round, upright, the hand of someone who had been taught well and had clung to the lesson, spelled out Monsieur le Commissaire Jules Maigret, and the home address. There was something childish about the care, almost as if the writer had stood back after each letter and admired its balance. He slid a thick thumb beneath the flap and opened it without tearing. Inside lay a single sheet, folded once. He unfolded it with the same unhurried gentleness with which he would have unfolded a map, and read, "Please forgive the mistake. You will have had this already, but it was not meant for you at all." There was no signature, no date beyond the postmark, which had smudged itself into anonymity. He read the sentence twice. It was nothing, and yet it had the quality of certain smells from childhood that one cannot place. Ordinary and inescapable. He put the paper flat on the table. Madame Maigret, who had long practice at not asking questions before coffee, adjusted the flame under the pan. "What is it?" she asked eventually. "A letter," he said. "A mistake. It announces itself as a mistake. That's considerate." He said it as a joke, but did not smile. His pipe had gone out. He did not relight it. The words on the page were not remarkable in themselves. They were the kind of words written by people who apologize for existing. Yet he felt the letter like a pebble in a shoe. "You will have had this already." If it were true, then the first had not arrived at home. There was no other envelope on the table, and the concierge had not called up, which meant the first would be at the office. He shrugged, which meant he was not shrugging it off. He folded the letter again and slipped it into the inner pocket of his coat, the one he used for small papers he did not want to lose in the daily shuffle of files and keys. "Eat, Jules," his wife said. She placed an egg in its cup and tapped the top with the back of a spoon. He obeyed, not from hunger, but from habit. When he had finished, he rose, kissed her cheek, stood a moment in the doorway with his hat in his hand, listening to the sound of the rain slackening and the tram gong from the corner. Life was there, in its ordinary harness. He pulled on his coat and went down the stairs, nodding to the concierge, who stood like a sentry with her broom. "Bad weather for rheumatism," she said. "It's democratic," he answered, which made her laugh as it always did. On the boulevard, The rain had thinned to a pinprick mist, fine enough to rest on the eyelashes. He turned up the collar of his coat and walked without hurry toward the Quai des Orfèvres. The city at that hour moved in the soft order of people who know their destinations. A delivery man wheeling his cart, a woman with a shawl crossing against the light, a clerk in a hat too new for his age. The river smelled of yesterday's leaves. He paused at a cafe because he always paused at a cafe when the air had this taste, and drank a small beer that left a ring on the zinc counter. The barman nodded with the respectful indifference owed to regulars. "Bad weather," the man said, "because one must say something." "It keeps the dust down," Maigret said. When he reached the office, he removed his coat with the care of a man lowering a child into bed. The corridor had already taken on that humid smell of the building's lungs, a mixture of paper, rain, and floor polish. Lucas was there, head bent, his hair in lines from the comb, a suit too tight across the shoulders. Janvier had a pencil behind his ear and the drowsy expression of someone who had not slept but had not minded it. "There's nothing this morning," Lucas said, "unless you count the little affair of the barman who poisoned no one." "We may count it this afternoon," Maigret said. He looked toward his door, which was ajar. On his blotter lay a second envelope. He did not rush to it. He hung his coat on the peg, took off his hat, laid his pipe on the window ledge. Only then did he go behind the desk, lower himself into the chair, and pull the envelope closer. He did not need to look at the handwriting to know it would be the same. He looked anyway. It was the same. The stamp was the same, placed with the same conscientiousness. If he had been superstitious, he might have thought someone had taken the envelope from his pocket and put it back. But the first still warmed the lining of his coat like a small animal. He opened the second. Inside lay the same paper, the same words, written, it seemed, by the same reluctant hand. He set it beside the first and lined them up like two glasses in a bar. The postmark on this one was no less smudged, the envelope no less correct. A printer's apprentice would have admired the repetition. "You see things twice now?" Janvier asked from the door, a smile in his voice. "Sometimes," Maigret said. "It depends on the light." He slipped both letters into a file folder not marked for anything in particular and closed it on them, not to hide them from anyone. There was nothing to hide, but to give them a place. He sat a moment more, listening to the building again. Somewhere a typewriter stalled. Somewhere else Lognon was certainly complaining about being asked to sit in a doorway and observe a grocery that sold nothing worth observing. The thought of Lognon, wet to the bone and righteous with gloom, comforted him. On the telephone, the superintendent's secretary asked, in a voice that had been pressed until all the air left it, whether his monthly report would be in by Friday. He promised it would. The lights hummed. The rain resumed, lightly, as if it had changed its mind. What was it that troubled him? Not the letters themselves. They were a trifle. A person had written them, a person who apologized twice for a single event, and thus made it double. "You will have had this already." He turned the phrase over as he might have turned a cufflink that had slipped out of its hole. Already he had a taste of the writer. Not young, not old. A hand made careful by shame. Someone for whom errors were like stains that could be rubbed at until the fabric wore through. And then there was the insistence that the letter had not been meant for him. People often told him that. They told him he had come into their lives by mistake, that he had misunderstood, that their business was not his. He had learned to mistrust the form of courtesy that tries to push you back onto the threshold. Lucas came to the door again, cautious as one entering a church. "They've brought in a fellow from the Avenue de la République. A quarrel with a landlady about hot water. He struck her with a broom handle and then cried." "Let him cry," Maigret said. "Give him tea." Lucas hesitated, then withdrew. The corridor swallowed him. For a while there was nothing but the rain and the workman-like shuffle of papers. Then the telephone again, and then a message on a slip from the concierge. A woman had called for him, had refused to leave a name, had said only that she had posted something in error and would call back when the post had corrected itself. The concierge had underlined error twice, as if attentive to the spirit of the thing. He put the slip beside the closed folder. He did not open the folder. The whole business had not yet risen to the level of a case. It was merely weather inside the building. He took his pipe from the ledge and packed it with a small religiousness, tamping it with his thumb. He struck a match and cupped it, watching the flame bow in the draught. He drew smoke, let it out, and felt the stubborn ache behind his eyes dissolve a little. At noon, he went out and crossed the quay to the little restaurant where the boiled beef on Thursdays had the consolation of a ritual. He sat near the window and let the steam of the soup soften his face. He thought of Madame Maigret washing the breakfast cups, of the concierge relaying messages with the zeal of a telegraph office, of the writer, the careful hand, the apology that replicated itself like a shadow. He thought, too, of all the people who had screamed into telephones and all the people who had not screamed but had written, and of which he trusted more. When he came back, there was another slip on his blotter. The woman had called again. She would not leave a name, but she had left a time, say 4 o'clock. He looked at the clock. It was not yet 2. The hours lay ahead like 3 chairs in a row, identical and patient. He took the folder again then, not because he needed to, but because sometimes one has to hold a thing to admit it exists. He did not read the sentences yet another time. He merely felt the weight of the paper, which was almost nothing, and the faint roughness at the crease where it had been folded. He put the folder back, turned slightly in his chair, and let his gaze rest on the rain that had begun again, in a manner so timid as to be persuasive. He did not smile, but he felt in his chest the beginning of that old, familiar pressure, the one that was not excitement and not anxiety, but the dull insistence of curiosity, which for him was nothing more than compassion with its hands in its pockets. The city went on, breathing. The letters sat wordless on his desk, and somewhere, not far, someone, no one extraordinary, prepared to tell him the story of a mistake that had been made twice. By 3:30, the rain had become a fine, stubborn veil. The office breathed its usual damp, the paper smell, the exhalations of the stairwell. Maigret tended to small things and kept glancing without glancing at the folder with the identical letters. The telephone rang once, a modest sound. Janvier half turned. "For you, patron." The voice was careful, like someone moving around furniture in the dark. "I posted something in error," a woman said. "I would prefer to explain in person. May I come up? I won't keep you." "You may." He had not set down the receiver when the concierge knocked and slid her face into the room. The lady who called, a punctual person. She opened the door. The woman entered without display. Her coat was good but shiny at the collar. The gloves were damp on the fingertips and dry at the palms. The shoes too dry for the weather, so a taxi had brought her to the door. Powder had been hurried. None of it would have mattered if it had not been so careful. "You have 2 letters," she said at once. "Both are my fault." He let the chair invite her. She sat with her handbag in her lap like an animal. He opened the folder and laid the twin sheets side by side, their identical apology making a single surface. "They resemble each other," he said, "like my mornings." Her voice held no complaint. "I wrote one last night and posted it because I feared I would not dare by daylight. This morning I saw I had addressed it wrongly. I wrote another to correct the error and made the same error again." "The wrong address being mine," he said. "Yes, and the right one. A man who no longer expects letters from me." She tried a smile that did not reach her eyes. "That is not your concern, I know." "People make it my concern," he said mildly. "It saves them effort." "What did you mean to write?" She opened the handbag and produced a 3rd envelope addressed to Monsieur Armand Piquet in the 12th. The flap was unsealed. This one should have gone. I stopped at the box and could not lift the lid. You intended to send it. I intended to abandon it. Posting is a respectable abandonment. And why write to Monsieur Piquet? Because I found something that belongs to him, and because someone else will suffer if I say nothing. She folded her gloves again. It's a letter. A letter addressed to him? Yes. It arrived yesterday for an empty room in my building. The concierge set it aside and asked me to decide, as she does with stray misfortunes. I am available, not discreet. And you decided by looking through the paper, he said. I saw enough. A woman was saying goodbye to a man who would not expect it. She named a place and an hour, used the word last. The date was today. She raised her eyes. At 6. The rain slackened as if to listen. The city held still. Somewhere a typewriter recovered itself and hesitated again. He waited. Waiting was his instrument. You know Piquet? I know the empty room and the debt on it. If I deliver the letter, I deliver more than the post. You fear the meeting, he said, and what would follow not having it. She looked at the twin pages on his desk. So I wrote to you by mistake twice. Perhaps I needed permission. He lit his pipe, and for a moment the smoke made a habitable weather. Where is the meeting? At the Café des Trois Bornes, the corner table by the mirror. 6. If she wrote it, she will come. If she didn't, someone wants him there for another reason. And you? I will be at my window unless you tell me not to be. Better you are not seen, he said. Do you have the envelope for the empty room? She handed it over. Same hand, same tidy stamp. The postmark was clear. Paris 11R, 10H20. He weighed it and set it beside the twins. They made a little procession on the blotter. He called into the corridor. Janvier. A note to Saint-Ambroise. Inquire for a Monsieur Armand Piquet, lately 3rd floor at 14, Rue de la Folie Méricourt. Lucas to the Trois Bornes at 5:45. Take the table that sees the mirror. The woman rose, lighter by a small degree, like someone returning a borrowed coat. At the door, she hesitated. You will not need my name. I will later, he said. For now, the weather is enough. She went out with the care of those who leave no mark. The rain resumed. Maigret looked at the 3 envelopes and at the word last, which has a way of arriving early. He slipped the 2 apologies into the folder and kept the other in his pocket. Then he settled to the remaining minutes, which are the longest part of any day, and listened to the building as if it were speaking through walls. At 5:15 he let the hours unclasp and went out alone, the letter to Piquet folded in his inner pocket like a coin not to be spent. The rain had flattened into fine wool that lay on the shoulders without dripping. He stopped once because a child, having dropped a string of beads, was carefully rethreading them on a wet step under her mother's umbrella. Before leaving, he had taken a call from Janvier. Saint-Ambroise remembered Piquet. A compositor grown loose around the hours, fingers marked by blue half-moons of ink. A man who had vacated his room at 14 with apologies and without forwarding address. Once kept company with a dressmaker's assistant who moved as neatly as she spoke. The concierge had said, he is the sort who wraps string twice around a parcel, the second turn for penance. The Café des Trois Bornes kept its mirror properly fogged by evening. Lucas had taken the back table near the radiator, hat low, newspaper open to the funerals. Maigret chose a small table and ordered a beer. The room smelled of chicory and damp wool. In the glass, the door performed its steady, small theater. Outside, the rain made the streetlights breathe and dim again. At 6 a man came in who looked as if he had borrowed another man's coat. Near 50, face ironed a little too hard by anxiety, hat with the soft, greasy shine of honest hands. One glove stayed on to hold the other. When he removed them, there were the ghostly stains a life around ink leaves behind. He looked at the tables first, as if hope were an item in stock. The man ordered nothing, then coffee, then water, which he did not touch. He placed a cheap watch on the tabletop and covered it with his palm, as though to muffle the minutes. The glass had a fine crack, a white scar that made the second hand hesitate at the 4. He glanced at the door without turning his head. The mirror did the turning for him. 6:10 brought a woman who could have been any woman. Mid-30s, a hat sensible enough to be forgotten, cheeks powdered in daylight haste, a hem with a darker tide line from the street. She let the warmth reach her, counted tables, disregarded faces until the corner fixture registered her. He half rose, then sat. She approached and stopped short. Not quite close, not quite distant. Maigret watched their hands, because hands speak more readily than mouths. Hers stayed on the strap of her handbag. His pressed the watch and released it, pressed it again. Their words could be guessed by their pauses. You came, of course. It is late. It is still time. We must be reasonable. At 6:20, the door opened again, and another woman entered, a small repetition that made the first seem less solid. She went to the bar, ordered a citron pressé, and watched the mirror without curiosity. She touched her scarf twice, as though confirming a decision she had already made. At the corner table, the first woman took from her bag a letter, folded once and held it between 2 fingers like a doctor holds a thermometer. She did not give it to the man. She showed it to him. He nodded, not at the paper, but at the place where it might be signed. He tried to speak and swallowed it. Then he said something that made her stare at the floor as if reading there. When she looked up, her eyes were dry but finished. She left the letter on the table without sliding it toward him, as if to let chance decide jurisdiction. She said a last thing that ended not with a period, but with the absence of one, and turned toward the door. He did not rise. He made a small motion with his hand that could have been goodbye if someone else had named it. When she had gone, he picked up the letter and did not open it, placed it in his inner pocket with the deliberate care of returning a tool to its drawer. He lifted the coffee and tasted that it had cooled. Then he finally saw Maigret in the glass, not as a policeman, but as another man who had stayed too long in warm rooms. There was the recognition ordinary Parisians have for each other, that polite admission that lives overlap without entangling. He paid and left. Lucas waited a minute and followed. Maigret remained and finished the beer to give the street a lead. In the mirror, the second woman at the bar was still looking at nothing. He stood, left coins sufficient for the chair's use, and closed his coat on the weather. Across the street, a third-floor window showed a figure adjusting a curtain and letting it fall again. He thought of the woman in his office who wished not to be seen. Somewhere a tram bell counted the distance, and the city exhaled as if relieved to have postponed something. The curtain settled. The street resumed. He waited a minute to let the street forget him, then paid and went out. Under the awning he looked up. 3rd floor. The curtain was still. The woman from the bar turned toward Belleville, walking like someone who neither invites company nor flees it. He followed at a polite distance. Fresh ressoles, the left heel a fraction quick. Twice she checked the clasp of her handbag. Once she stepped around a puddle she could have crossed. At the second corner she adjusted her scarf as if acknowledging an invisible audience. She passed a window of dresses on headless stands and glanced at the hems with a worker's eye. She went into a doorway between a tobacco shop and a locksmith. The stair smelled of starch and hot metal. A card in the glass, Daras Etier, retouches, robe de ville. He did not go up. He walked on to the kiosk by the square. Lucas telephoned. He walked the block twice as if timing his regret. In a doorway he tore the letter in two, kept both halves in the same pocket, then took a room on Saint-Maur. He lies down in his coat like a man renting a pause. "Stay above him," Maigret said, and set the receiver back. He returned to the café for the barman's ledger of faces. "The lady at the bar?" "Lemon and silence," the man said. "Pays exact, from the workshop opposite." "And the two in the corner?" "They were not two," the barman said. They were an ending. Back at the quay, the building felt warmer. On his desk, Janvier had left a note about Piquet. Compositor Modest Arias left his key on a nail, no noise. A woman brought broth in March, dressmaker's hands. He took from his pocket the envelope addressed to Piquet, the one the empty room had received. It had the weight of a single sheet. He opened it. Armand, forgive me for calling it last when it is only late. I cannot keep the room that is not a room. They will come about the money. If you do not want to see me, I will understand, but do not be at the mirror table at 6. If you are there, I will take it as permission to say what should have been said while it still had weight. Leonie. He read it twice. No threat, only someone trying to file life by its edges. Leonie. A name that sat well with a scarf touched twice and hems checked by habit. The telephone purred again. Lucas. He's put his shoes on the radiator to dry. The scraps are on the table as if he hopes the night will paste them. He watches the ceiling the way men read without words. Good. Wait him out. He dialed home. Madame Maigret answered. Only rain, he said. You have 2 of something again, she said. 2 letters, 2 women, the same hour. Then it is one thing seen from 2 sides. He put on his coat and went to 14, Rue de la Folie Méricourt. The vestibule smelled of damp wood and cabbage. The concierge came out with an apron that had honest work on it. You're the commissaire. About the letter. About the people the letter makes, he said. The woman with broth in March? She carries her head like a hat that fits. Pays quickly, speaks slowly, lives over the atelier 3 streets away. You'll want the room? He followed her up. The stair muttered in old wood. The room had decided not to keep warmth. The bed was made with apology. On the sill, a dead geranium kept its pot out of habit. A clean square on the floor marked where a trunk had stood, and a paler rectangle on the wall where a picture had been. Goodbyes leave those shapes. He waited until the window gave back only his own coat, then closed the door and gave the building back its silence. Outside, the rain had become a suggestion. He walked toward Belleville again, letting the city's breath keep time. The workshop windows glowed, silhouettes bent over cloth and straightened, a slow machine run by patience. He stood under the awning opposite and smoked until the coal touched his fingers and told him to choose. He did not ring tonight. People who are nearly finished deserve one more quiet hour. He turned away and crossed toward the square. In a darkened shop window, he saw his own hat where a stranger's should be. The matter had not yet risen to the dignity of a case. It was still weather in rooms. But a small wrongness worked at him like a pebble in the shoe. The woman who wished not to be seen had a window across from the cafe. The woman at the bar wished to be seen by no one at all. He suspected Piquet, in his coat, had chosen to wait that night. He walked back toward the river without hurry, which for him was the shortest way. He watched the lamps ripple on the water. He reached home late enough that the stair was quiet, and the concierge's broom leaned like a soldier off duty. Madame Maigret had left the lamp low and a pot on the stove, a soup that had been waiting without impatience. He ate because the house asked it of him. When he told her, in his compressed way, about the cafe, the mirror, the 2 women and the letter torn in 2, she listened with the same stillness with which she turned the pages of a magazine she never finished. 2 halves in the same pocket, she said. Then he hasn't decided. And someone decided for him to be there, he answered. Not the one who handed the letter, she said almost to herself. The other. The one who watched to see if what she feared would happen. She works across from the cafe, he said. She mends things, Madame Maigret said. People who mend see where the fabric will give. He slept enough to give the morning back its edges. On the way to the quay, he bought a soft pencil, the kind that leaves a memory on paper. In his office, he laid the twin apology letters flat and, cupping his pipe for warmth without lighting it, shaded their surfaces lightly. Indentations rose like footprints under frost. Under the timid sentence about the mistake he made out, backward and faint, a telephone number and a name he did not need to guess. Darras. Pads remember more than people intend. Janvier came to the door. Piquet left Saint-Maur at 7, with the look of a man who wants to apologize to breakfast. He walked toward the 12th, turned back, bought a paper, and read the same page 3 times. "Let him have the weather," Maigret said. "Lucas?" "Still on him. The scraps are still in the pocket." At 11 he walked to the doorway between the tobacco shop and the locksmith. Inside, the air had the quick smell of steam and chalk. Women bent over cloth. A small iron gave little sighs as it was set down. The woman from the bar lifted her head almost at once. "You are the commissaire," she said. "I am looking for Darras." "You have found her. Then you know why I'm here." She wiped her hands, clean though reddened by hot water. "If it's to scold Léonie, you may scold me instead. She works when there is work. Otherwise, she feeds her mother and pays 2 rooms in arrears. She wrote last because she is tired, not theatrical. I've come because a letter meant for an empty room arrived in your building, and because 2 letters came to me to say so." Her mouth moved as if around a pin. "I tried to keep my name out of it. Names make things heavier. The concierge brought me the envelope with the bread. I looked because the stare looks. I read enough to be frightened of silence." "You watched last night," he said. "From the bar first. The mirror is kinder than glass when people are deciding whether to go on." She studied his pipe. "Piquet is decent. He moved out because shame eats more rent than poverty. He went to the cafe because he cannot refuse a politely worded sentence. And you?" "I keep a ledger of other people's stitches. If she found him, she might say something that cannot be unsaid." "Did you write to him too?" "I mend, I don't write. When I write, I address letters to policemen by mistake. You have proof." He showed her the envelope for the empty room. "You read mirror table and 6. "I did," she said. "And I saw the handwriting, the round upright kind that wants to behave. Who else reads the post where you live? The stair reads. The concierge's nephew listens at doors. The drunk on the 2nd floor recites names. The porters read with their hands." She smiled. "And I read what falls. Who will come asking for money? A man with a bill book and clean fingernails. Convinced, not angry." A bell rang in the street. A boy delivered trousers. The workroom closed around them. Darras lowered her voice. "She will be here afternoon. You may be mended with the rest." "Better here than in a cafe," he said. She nodded and returned to a sleeve. He watched her hands and thought of the twin letters whose identical apology had found their mark. People speak of fate. Often it is habit written twice. He left with the card from the door and the taste of starch in his mouth. On the pavement, he telephoned Lucas. "Follow him to the end of his decision. If he talks to paper, listen. And if he talks to a person, listen harder. Bring me the scraps when he lets them go." He looked up at the windows. The quay drew him like a habit. Between rooms, a small word had been chosen badly and set other words in motion. He let the river's slow breath settle his own for now there. He returned at noon and stood in the doorway, long enough for the steam to warm his hat. Again, Darras looked up from a cuff. "She will come," she said. A little after, a woman entered who could have been anyone. She removed her gloves. "You are Léonie," he said. She inclined her head. "If there is fault, I prefer it to be mine." "Fault belongs to no one until it sits down," he said, showing her a chair near the stove. She sat with her handbag on her knees. "You were at the cafe," she said. "I saw a man who looked as if he were allowing others to decide. I hoped it was you." "It was. You left a letter on the table." "I wrote 2, she said. "I addressed one to the room that used to be his and posted it because courage rises when the box shuts. I carried the other in my bag in case the first missed him. He came. I left it and kept my mouth closed so I would not say the wrong part. You wrote last and meant late. Her hands folded on the bag. Words have weight. Last is a stone. I can carry late. I wanted to deliver something he could put down. Why the empty room? I don't have the new address, and the concierge likes me better when I pretend not to know things. Also, a letter to a place where no one lives can apologize without disturbing anyone. Money is pressing. It presses everyone, she said. A man comes with a book and fingers like paper. He will take the trunk if I let him. My mother coughs. I sew when there is sewing, and when there isn't, there is soup. Darras moved in the back with an iron that sighed. She works well, Darras said. The door opened with a ring. A man stepped in whose nails told their own history. Madame Darras, Mademoiselle Léonie, he said, bowing to both. A small account. We are speaking, Maigret said. The man turned his neat smile. Then we will speak softly. You will return tomorrow, Maigret said. At 10. I keep hours more prompt than weather, the man said. He bowed, put his book away, and went out. Léonie let out the air she had saved. I am not proud. Pride pays no rent, he said. Tell me about Piquet. He is decent. He is ashamed of being decent and poor. He left the room because the room kept reminding him. We were friends when there were enough hours. Then there were fewer. I wrote because silence can be as ugly as shouting. And last night, he looked older than the mirror. He did not ask me to sit. That was kindness. If we had talked, I might have asked for something I had no right to ask. What would that have been? To go on pretending the room would be ours again. The iron tapped its rest and settled. The telephone in the hall rang, and Darras called his name. He took the receiver. Lucas. He went to the river, then to a printer's alley. He stood in a doorway smelling ink. After that, he bought a stamp and a cheap envelope. He wrote, tore it up, wrote again, kept the second. The scraps are still traveling in his pocket. To whom did he address the second? He used only a first name. Léonie. Do not interfere, Maigret said. If he posts it, learn the box. He returned to the stove. Léonie had not shifted. He will write, he said. I did not come to be written to, she answered. I came to say that if the letter that arrived where no one lives is found, I am not ashamed of it, it is mine. And the one you left on the table, also mine. I thought of taking it back from his pocket when he looked down. That is not how one mends. He stood, felt for his pipe, and let it wait. You will go home now. You will keep your door on the latch. If the man with the book returns before 10, he will meet me instead. If Piquet comes, you will listen before speaking. And you? I will see the river, decide a few more things. Then I will speak to your friend when he is ready to be spoken to. She rose. Something in her had stiffened. Simply the decision to carry her own weight. She thanked Darras with a look they had used before. At the threshold, she turned. Is there trouble? She asked. There is always trouble, he said. Tonight we will let it be small. She went out. The bell rang, then recovered. He stood in the smell of chalk and steam and thought about letters that arrived twice. Once to the wrong place in order to be kind, and once to the right place because kindness has run out of time. He put on his coat and went into the afternoon that had remembered to be cold. He took the afternoon along the river and let it slow his breathing. Barges moved. The quays wore a tired light. When the telephone rasped, it was Lucas. He has the envelope again. He stood at the box on Oberkampf, lifted the lid, then put the letter back. He doesn't trust the post, Maigret said. Watch the hand, not the feet. He's toward Belleville, stopping at windows like a man looking for news of himself. Do not go too near. He turned from the river and took the streets that knew him. The workshop shutters were half down. In the bar opposite, the mirror kept its habits. At dusk, a man in a proper coat arrived. brisk, nails pale. The little book went to the inner pocket. Maigret did not cross. He let the pipe hang unlit. 5 minutes later, Piquet appeared, hat low, carrying nothing but indecision. He hesitated, looked up at the windows as if choosing a floor, and went in. The stair had its slow smell of starch and hot metal. Voices hummed. Machines sighed. The stair kept its patience. He waited a minute, then went up. On the landing he met the man with the book coming down, smile ironed on, hat correct. "Tomorrow at 10, the man said. "I keep promises better than clocks." "You keep them early," Maigret answered. The weather suggested otherwise, the man said, sliding sideways on a stair, and went out. On the next landing, Piquet stood with his hat in his hand, staring at the grain of a door as if answers hid in wood. "You have words that won't behave," Maigret said. "I meant to slip a paper under and go away before it could say what it said." The doors latched. "I heard voices," he admitted. The man with the nails took out his book. Darras does not owe such a book. "Accounts are often written where they don't belong," Maigret said. "Come down." They left the stair and went into the dusk. The workshop light fell in strips. They walked toward the square. "I'm a compositor," Piquet said. "I put other men's words in order. When I write mine, they go crooked. I told her to forget the room. I told her I would come back when it had nothing to forgive. I told her many things implied by silence." "And the letter?" "I wrote Léonie on an envelope and could not find the rest of her in the lines. It is a child's trick to write only a name and hope the city will guess." "You kept the scraps?" "They were a rehearsal. I've rehearsed the apology for months." A tram went by coughing. When it had passed, Piquet spoke again. "The man with the book has 2 voices," he said. "One for halls, one for doors. He says he will be kind if we are quick." "Kinder to whom?" "To his arithmetic." "Why was he here tonight?" "To make tomorrow mean something," Piquet said, "and because he thinks women bend at dusk." They stood under a lamp undecided. Piquet turned his watch. The second hand still hesitated at the 4. "You will not jump into the river," Maigret said. "No, I will go on making small errors until one of them matters." "Better a small truth," Maigret said. "Go home. If you must deliver a paper, give it to the living and not to a box." Piquet went toward Saint-Maur, not hurrying, not delaying. When he had gone, Maigret crossed to the workshop. Darras opened before he could knock. "He came to leave something and left with it," she said. "And the collector?" "He came to practice arriving early. He thinks it creates law." "What name does he give?" She took a card from the pincushion. "Salavin, Bureau de Recouvrement." The card was too clean for the room it described. He put it in his pocket with the letters. "If he returns before 10, do not sign anything that looks like a kindness." "I sign hymns," she said. Back at the quay, the corridors had cooled. On his desk, the 2 apology letters lay where he had left them. He set Salavin's card beside them and the envelope to the empty room. He shaded the surface of one letter again, lightly. In the indentations he found, below the apology, the start of a list. Numbers like stitches. 3, 7, 10. Not a sum, a schedule. Under that, faint, 3 bornes, mirror. He leaned back and filled the pipe. Everything had come twice. The apology, the meeting, the collector, the hesitation at the box. Twice makes habit, and habit makes motive. The telephone rang once and stopped, the uncertain call of someone who wanted to hang up before being heard. He looked out at the river. Somewhere in Belleville, a woman waited behind a latched door. Somewhere else, a man counted himself poor and decent and still a little proud. He wrote on a slip, "Salavin, early, Darras, window, Piquet, letter not posted." He pinned it to the folder and waited without looking at the clock. The ring that had stopped returned, longer. Janvier again. A woman on Rue de la Folie Méricourt had heard footsteps pause outside her door and then go away. He sent a uniform. Maigret put down the receiver and listened. The night lay across the quay without choosing a side. He closed the folder, took his hat, and went out to let the streets work on him. The Trois Bornes still held its mirror. Across the way, the shutters of Darras's workshop were half pulled. In the square, he watched Salavin's shadow consult another shadow and peel off like a practiced trick. When he crossed, Salavin had made himself a man again. "You keep appointments that are not yet agreed," Maigret said. "I am diligent," Salavin answered. "Debt dislikes leisure." 10 means 10, Maigret said. "Early makes no law." Salavin inclined his head. "Good evening, commissaire." He climbed one flight and stood above the atelier, smelling starch and the remainder of heat. Through the door came the sound of a woman folding cloth in the manner of someone folding a day. He did not knock. At home, Madame Maigret had the lamp low and the saucer for his pipe set out. He gave her the day in a few sentences. "Twice," he said. "Everything arrives twice. When people ask for help without asking, they repeat themselves," she said. He thought of the indentations on the pad. Darras, the ladder of numbers, the café written as if to a mirror. "She would call it a mistake," he murmured. "But she copied the apology twice, so I would not ignore how careful her hand is." He slept and woke early. The boulevard prepared its grey. He kissed his wife's forehead and went out feeling he followed his own footprints. At the office, he found only the hum of radiators, and Lucas's note, "Saw him write, did not post. Watching." He tucked it under the folder and left at once for Belleville. At Darras's, the shutters were up. Inside, steam rose. "You are early," Darras said. "The debt likes punctuality," he said. She nodded toward the back room. "Her mother has the night behind her. Léonie will come when she has made soup thin enough to last." He stood by the stove. "You wrote to me twice," he said. "I wrote badly once, and shame made it twice," she said. "You also wrote Trois Bornes mirror on the page before," he said. "Your pad knows your thoughts." "I made that note when I had decided to sit where the glass would not be unkind," she said. "If she said too much, I would order another lemon to make a reason not to hear." "And the numbers? 3, 7, 10, the visits." The bell rang. A woman with red hands brought a parcel and left a word for luck. After her, Léonie came, hair pinned too quickly, color in her cheeks from stoves and worry. She started at seeing him and did not apologize. "Has he posted anything?" she asked. "He has written your name and kept it," Maigret said. She set down a basket. "There is flour and there is the idea of flour," she said. Darras put an iron on the plate. "At 10, she said. "At 10, Maigret repeated. "Before that, no doors will open to books." He went out and stood in the street where the light had now admitted itself. He telephoned Lucas and told him to let Piquet walk unescorted into his mourning. Then he waited in the doorway of the locksmith, which smelled of filings and honest grease, while the church clock decided whether to be on time. Salavin came at 9:45 with a determined hat and a pen already uncapped in his mind. He paused to arrange his face into courtesy. Maigret stepped from the doorway. "You are ahead of your habit," Maigret said. "My habit is to be early for resistance," Salavin answered. "It wastes mine," Maigret said. 10. They stood without speaking. At 5:02, Piquet appeared, washed into a fragile readiness, the watch in his pocket ticking toward its hesitation. He saw Maigret, then Salavin, and for an instant the street narrowed until it held only those two choices. He lifted a hand, not in greeting, but to give it something to do. 10 struck with a sound that meant both permission and sentence. Darras was already at her door. Léonie behind her, holding a handkerchief she had forgotten to use. Salavin produced the book. Piquet stepped forward and, before any of them, put a folded paper into Maigret's hand. "For the living?" he said. Maigret did not look at the paper. He looked at their faces and waited for the part of the morning that would decide what kind of day it would be. The paper was thin, the fold careful, the ink pressed hard as if to make the words hold. Salavin's lips shaped a protest and thought better of it. Daris lifted her chin a fraction, like a seam set straight. Leonie's hands met and stayed clasped, ready to let go quietly. He did not open it at once. He let the paper breathe, then unfolded it the way one smooths a crease from a sleeve. The handwriting was square, the lines pressed hard as if to make the words obey. There were two parts. The first was addressed to no one and everyone. I, Armand Piquet, accept the arrear standing in the name of Mademoiselle Léonie for the room at 14, Rue de la Folie Méricourt. I will pay each Monday in sums I can keep. I ask delay of seizure. I refuse charity. The second part, in smaller letters, was for one person only. Léonie, it is not last. It is late. If you permit, I will stand where your door is a door again. He looked up. Salavin had arranged his features into the expression used for signatures. Léonie held the handkerchief as if it might recall a better use. Daris watched not him, but Léonie, the way a seamstress watches a thread she knows will hold. It satisfies the appetite of arithmetic, Maigret said, folding the paper. You will take weekly payments, beginning Monday. Today, you will leave with nothing but the air you brought in. Salavin's smile made a small adjustment. I admire sentiment in its corner. Out here, we keep ledgers. You will also keep the law? Maigret said. No seizure without order, no visit before the hour agreed. Right received, proposal under review, and go. There is the matter of interest, Salavin murmured. There is the matter of shame, Maigret answered. It compounds faster. Quote me to your book. Léonie's mouth softened, not into a smile, only into the absence of bracing. Piquet stood as men stand when the weight they feared proves liftable. Salavin produced his neat pencil, wrote the phrase, tore the page squarely, and handed it with a bow. Monday, he said. 10, Maigret returned. Piquet looked at him as if to be told how to stand next. Go with her, Maigret said, but not as a debtor. Léonie's hand found the latch. Then she remembered the folded paper. She touched his sleeve. Keep it for now, she said. Things don't fly away so quickly when you hold them. I'm heavy, he said. I make papers stay put. They went inside. The door closed with a noise that signified ordinary life. Daris lingered. I read the empty room letter, she said without apology. I didn't carry it to him because I wanted to shorten the distance between their mouths and their scents. I sent you those 2 apologies because I am clumsy when I mean well. Meaning well is an art like any other, he said. It takes years. She nodded. He has a job if pride allows it. My cousin at the press needs hands that know ink. It pays in weeks, not promises. Tell him tomorrow, Maigret said. Today he will be busy being late instead of last. At the corner he telephoned Janvier. Look at Salavin, he said. Search among judgments for his signatures. Early visits, threats by courtesy. Men who collect before the order exists. He smells of it, Janvier said. Lognon will enjoy disliking him. Let Lognon dislike him carefully, Maigret said. We are not making a case. We are setting a chair under someone who is tired. He returned to the quay. On his desk, the twin apologies lay with Salavin's slip. He put Piquet's paper with them and watched the 4 pages as if they might whisper. He took a swallow of beer and thought of the night call that faltered, footsteps pausing at a door, then going away. He thought of the numbers shaded from the pad. 3, 7, 10. Visits. Habits. The way fear keeps time. Lucas arrived with the look of a dog that has carried something without tearing it. He laid 2 crumpled halves on the blotter. "He dropped them after writing the paper you hold," he said. "They match, but he won't need them." Maigret fitted the edges. The seam showed. It did not matter. The lines read the same as the letter left on the café table, with an extra word pressed too hard at the end. "Pardon." "You will eat," he told Lucas. "I will," Lucas said. When he was alone again, he did nothing. Doing nothing was part of the work. Rain returned as accompaniment. He struck a match, cupped it, and let the pipe make a sensible weather. The telephone stayed brave on the second ring. The concierge at 14, the nephew had found on the stair a card slipped under a wrong door in the night. The name Salavin printed, with a pencil note. 10 earlier, if convenient. She thought he should know. He thanked her and told her to keep it. Even kindnesses cast a shadow. He put the card with the papers, closed the folder on the small weather of other people's lives, and stood for his coat. The day was not finished, but it had chosen its tone. He would carry it a little way and set it down where it would not get wet. He left the quay with the folder under his arm and a feeling he knew too well. The work was finished enough to let people go on living, not finished enough to satisfy a report. He went to Rue du Temple, where Salavin's office perched over a shop that repaired umbrellas. Salavin received him behind a desk with a blotter like a mirror. Files stood tight as teeth. A clock ran a minute fast. The calendar faced the right day. "You come to collect, commissaire," Salavin said. "I came to return something." He set the visiting card on the blotter. "This fell under a door that had nothing to do with you." Salavin looked at the card, then at the clock. Punctuality sometimes slips through cracks. "Law does not," Maigret said. "One more early visit and I will collect you instead." Salavin's shoulders moved by a millimeter. "There are targets. Gentleness is slow. My employers do not pay me to be slow." "Then teach them the price of speed." He stood. "Tomorrow is Monday. 10. Salavin bowed a shade deeper than he meant to. "I will discover the virtue of clocks." Outside, the air had a laundered smell. He walked to Belleville without hurrying. At the atelier, the shutters were up. Steam met him like soup. Darris, sleeves rolled, lifted her chin. "I prefer to see endings with a seam," she said. "Keep your iron hot," he answered. "Your cousin at the press?" "He will take hands that know letters. Piquet will pretend to refuse and then accept. Men like him do everything twice." Through the doorway, he saw Léonie at a small table with her mother's cup between her hands. Piquet sat opposite, hat on the chair back as if it would compromise the soup. No words came to his ear. He did not need them. On the stair, the concierge stopped him with a whisper. There was another letter in the empty box. Only an envelope, without a stamp, pushed in by a hand. He took it. Inside lay a single sheet, the same paper as before, the same careful upright hand. It read, "Please forgive the mistake. You will have had this already, but it was meant for you after all. It was not signed." He stood in the stairwell where damp wood and cabbage had acquired a note of starch. The 2 sentences changed nothing and changed the air. People ask for help twice when they are ashamed to ask once. They also say thank you with the same clumsy tool. He went out and crossed to the cafe for a beer that had waited all morning without growing impatient. He drank and thought of the indentations on the pad, the numbers like stitches, the word last corrected to late, of Salavin's neat frauds, of Piquet's watch that hesitated at the 4. Back at the quay, he wrote a line for the superintendent's report that said almost nothing and enough. Domestic interference averted. Voluntary arrangement obtained. No action required. He placed the 3rd letter with the twins in the folder and closed it. Lognon drifted in like a damp coat. "They say you rescued a romance with soup." "I adjusted a chair," Maigret said. "It will wobble," Lognon predicted with pleasure. "All chairs wobble," he said. "The point is to sit anyway." When the building had settled again, he walked home by the long way. The boulevard wore its pewter. Madame Maigret had set the lamp and a plate. He told her the day in the same few sentences as always. Somewhere, a tram bell counted distance, then forgot to finish. "And the letter that arrived twice?" she asked. "3 times, he corrected gently. "The third said what the first 2 were trying to say?" "And what was that?" "That the mistake was to call it a mistake." He filled his pipe and did not light it. "Some things are simply addressed badly before they find where they belong." She nodded, as if adding salt to a pot. He thought of Piquet's careful fold, of Léonie's small word altered in time, of Darras's pad that had remembered what she could not say aloud. He would sleep. In the morning there would be boiled beef if it were Thursday, and a report to sign, and a city of doors that opened to the right knock. He saw himself in the mirror above the mantel. Hat on the peg, coat steaming a little, the tired compassion still doing its slow arithmetic. In that arithmetic, 2 letters can equal 1 kindness, and habit can look like fate until someone waits long enough for it to loosen. On the table lay the newspaper, the corner lifting and falling in the draught, like a tired hand. He let it be. Outside, the rain decided at last to stop without taking a bow, and the night breathed like someone who had found a better position. He emptied his pipe and set it by the saucer. Then he sat a long while, doing nothing, which was sometimes the only useful thing to do. Monday came on pads of felt. The boulevard wore its workday gray, and the rain, having exhausted itself, left a smell of iron in the air. At the quay, the radiators ticked like insects behind the walls. Lucas had already been and gone. His note waited under the paperweight. Salafin in office at 9:40. Watching clock. Piquet left with empty envelope, full pockets of courage. Janvier arrived with his scarf still damp and eyebrows that had not yet chosen a mood. "You have your report line?" he asked. "I have as much report as the day deserves," Maigret said. He tapped his pipe against the ashtray, decided against lighting it, and put on his coat. "Come along if you like quiet endings." Belleville was honest about Mondays. Shutters halfway, brooms out, the square rinsed and ready. At the atelier, the steam of irons climbed as orderly as hymns. Darras had her sleeves rolled and a mouth pinched in concentration that made her look younger. "You're in time to see a miracle disguised as arithmetic," she said, without looking up. Out in the hall, the door to the small room stood ajar. Léonie sat with her mother, who measured the morning with small sips. Piquet stood by the window with his hat in his hands, as if waiting for a weather change. He had shaved too close and nicked himself. Bravery's smallest receipt. At 10:03, Salafin appeared at the landing carrying punctuality like a parcel that must not be dropped. He had subtracted a minute from his hurry and added it to his smile. "Good morning," he said to the corridor. 10, Maigret said, and the stare, which had heard everything, breathed once as the hour arrived. They went into the workroom because no one should pay or be paid in a hall. Salafin laid his book on a table that had known better uses. Darras slid an ironing board aside with a noise like a warning. Piquet took from his pocket a folded paper and a coin purse that had seen more hope than coins. He set 5 notes down as if setting a child on its feet. Léonie did not touch anything. Her hands stayed folded, the handkerchief hidden, as though superstition had learned to be discreet. Salafin wrote, tore carefully, and handed over a receipt. Week 1, agreeable. "We begin," he said, with the tone of a priest not quite believing in his own liturgy. "We continue," Darras corrected from her iron. It took only as long as it takes to fit a stitch. Then the book went away, the hat went on, and Salafin discovered that he could leave a room without being the last to do so. On the landing, he paused. "You will keep to your hour," Maigret said. "I will keep to my hour," Salafin repeated, not unhumbled. When he had gone, the workroom remembered to be a workroom. The iron sighed. Darras pulled a seam straight and looked at Piquet without smiling. "My cousin at the press," she said. "Rue du Chemin Vert. He needs hands, not promises. Tell him I sent your fingers." Piquet's mouth worked once before sound came. "I have ink in me that does not leave," he said as if announcing a disability. "It is the correct disease for a printer," Darras said. "Go before he cures himself of needing you." He turned to Léonie awkwardly, as if doors required new manners. "At noon?" he asked. "At noon," she said with a steadiness that surprised her. He went. Léonie watched the stair a moment longer than necessary, and then faced the day. "I will wash the soup pot," she said, as a woman might say. "I will keep breathing." Out on the street, the air had warmed enough to make the smells of starch and bread wake up. Maigret and Janvier walked without speaking. They reached the corner where the locksmith's shavings gave the morning a dry sweetness. A man passed with a ladder. A child trailed a ribbon in a puddle. The city laid out its excuses for living. "You lifted nothing, you arrested no one," Janvier said, trying the idea on. "That will go in the report," Maigret said. "It happens to be the truth." They split at the square. He let his feet take him toward Rue du Chemin Vert, a street that kept the dream of factories even when the factories slept. Inside a courtyard smelling of oil and paper, a press coughed and found its rhythm. The cousin had a face that belonged to grease under the nails, and a laugh that arrived before the joke. "For Darras," Maigret said, and that was an introduction enough. Piquet stood near a galley, sleeves rolled, looking at the type as a man might look at a long-lost relative. The foreman nodded at him, the smallest nod that nevertheless moved a day forward. "You will not need me," Maigret said, and left them to the same language. On the way back, he stopped at the Trois Bornes because the mirror had been faithful and deserved his custom. The barman wiped the zinc and examined the morning with professional pessimism. "Your couple?" the barman asked. "They are becoming two people again," Maigret said. "That's more difficult than being one," the man observed, and set down a beer with the same care he would use for a confession. He drank half and watched the door make its little theater. Men went to their trades, women to their reckonings, and the mirror dulled slightly under breath that was not dramas but livings. In the glass, he saw himself not as the barman saw him or as the city did, but as something that, like rain, came and went and left places cleaner than before. At the quay, he wrote 3 lines and then crossed out one. He telephoned the superintendent's secretary and delivered the report aloud as if it were a menu. No offense established, 2 citizens in difficulty, arrangement reached without coercion. Secondary matter, premature collection attempts checked. He could hear at the other end the pencil-writing domestic in a tidy hand. Lognan came to the door to be himself. "So," he said, in a tone that expected evidence to apologize for its absence. "So we prevented something unphotographable," Maigret said. Lognan sniffed. "It won't make the paper." "No," Maigret said. "It made soup." When the afternoon began to fold itself, he took the folder and, without opening it, knew where each page lay inside. The twin apologies, the empty room letter with last corrected to late, the crumpled halves he had fitted together out of courtesy, the card that had slid under the wrong door, the unsigned 3rd letter admitting what shyness had tried to hide. He returned them to the drawer that held these small climates people brought him, weather reports of hearts. On his way home, he passed Rue de la Folie Méricourt to see whether habit had become a fate or merely a habit again. At a window, he saw a woman shake a cloth, the gesture brisk without anger. On the 2nd floor, a boy practiced a whistle and stopped when he heard it disappoint him. The concierge's broom leaned like a soldier off duty. The box in the vestibule held nothing, which is sometimes the best kind of post. He walked on. The boulevard had the color of pewter again, but pewter that had been rubbed by a hand. In his pocket, the pipe was warm from his palm. Madame Maigret had set a lamp and pressed a place in the newspaper with her finger, though she had not read what it said. He told her the day in short sentences that did not waste her soup. "And the letter?" she asked. "The one that arrived twice has learned what it wanted," he said. "The last of it arrived today, without a stamp." She tilted her head. People learn in installments. He ate, then lit his pipe and let the match burn down to his knuckles. He thought of the second hand on Piquet's watch, which had hesitated at the 4. He pictured it finding its courage and stepping over. He thought of Darris's pad, the ghost of Trois Born, mirror pressed into the paper beneath the apology, of Salavin discovering that early did not mean right, of Léonie choosing the smaller word and making it truer. He did not congratulate himself. He was a man who waited in rooms until someone decided to speak. Sometimes he nudged a chair under a weight. Sometimes he told punctuality to learn manners. The river would go on moving even when he did not watch it, and the city would remember to breathe. He looked at his hat on the peg, at the window where the night took its time arriving. "Will you read?" Madame Maigret asked. "Not yet," he said. He listened to the building, the concierge putting her broom away, the child on the second floor rehearsing a cough that was already improving, a neighbor turning a key without trying to be quiet. In those sounds he heard the end of a story that had not wanted to be a story, only a mistake corrected, an address found, 2 people given back to themselves. He let the pipe go out by itself, and did nothing for a while, which was sometimes the last and best thing to do. Then, because the day had been ordinary and therefore complete, he reached for the paper and read the same paragraph twice.